here for 12 years, 11 years now. It's been on
Where's Tailchasers?
123rd Street, Ocean City. That's where you'll find me now. It's my current home.
Okay.
Really awesome there. Outdoor, full deck dining, playground, pull boats up. I mean, it's a fabulous summer place. Through the duration of this, if you have any questions or want to get closer or even look at something to get a better idea of what I'm doing or see what's happening, feel free to walk up, ask any question through the duration of it. That's really about it. For the first week, I really wanted to start something simple, which is just kind of a steak and potato dish, and kind of accent a few of the local ingredients that we have. But steak, this time of year, everyone loves cooking steak, right? Grilling it, whatever it is. I'm going to show you the way I love cooking steak and how easy it is to really cook. A lot of people are kind of afraid of it. You know, it's an expensive piece of meat. You don't want to mess it up. You want to do everything a certain way, and to a lot of people can be very intimidating when it's actually very simple. So we're going to have some flank steak here that we're going to pan sear. I'm going to do a little bit of quick mash, red skin potato. I have some beautiful wild mushrooms from Eastview Farms. These are yellow and gray trumpet mushrooms, actually, that they grow for us and bring pretty much every day. Really nice. Some quick diced shallots, some herbs, just real nice, simple, clean, easy things that's quite approachable at home for a lot of people to do, just knowing how to do it. So the most important thing with cooking steak is allowing it to rest countertop and get to like room temperature first. When a steak gets to room temperature, it allows it to cook evenly and for the heat to transfer through the steak more. Because when a steak cooks, you know, the heat has to transfer in and get the temperature and cook it and cook it and cook it. So if it's all cold, like ice cold out the fridge, when it goes into a pan or on a grill, the outside gets really hot really fast, and it takes a lot more time for the inside of that steak to get warm and get to that medium or that desired temperature. So if it's all at room temperature, it makes the transfer of heat a lot easier, and you'll get a more even cook, and you'll avoid that really hard, dark, well done ring with that rare in the middle that everyone tends to get. Usually it's because you're starting your steak off cold. So just prepare a couple things off the start. I've already had my steak resting out at room temp, so it's right where it needs to be. While you're allowing your steak to rest too, for about an hour before you cook it, I would season it up so that way the salt can really work its way into it, the salt, the pepper, whatever you choose to season with. Steak, it doesn't need to be anything any more difficult than salt and pepper. And really have at it too. Everyone knows me, I'm a little heavy-handed with the salt, especially with meat, because what happens when you cook steak, grill steak, fish, anything really, whether it's a pan, whether it's a grill, oven roasted, whatever, a lot of the seasoning will actually cook off, stick to the pan, and you lose some of it. You know, you grill and you know the char that sticks to the grill that you always have to scrape off. A lot of that contains your seasoning too. So you can go a little over and you're going to be fine because most of it's going to come off anyway. So we have our steak season. We're going to let that sit just for a moment. I just want to get a couple prep items done real fast. We're going to be finishing the steak with some shallots. I definitely prefer shallots as opposed to onions when you're cooking with things like steak. It has a more balanced and delicate flavor profile, and it's not very in your face and oniony and bitter. Just want a nice fine dice on it. I did kind of cheat today. The potatoes have already kind of been steamed off real quick, so they're nice and soft for a quick mash, so that we don't have to start from scratch, because we'd be here forever waiting for water to boil and this and that. So I brought a little quick sauce pot. We're gonna let it get to some heat. Just a little bit of oil. The potatoes can be very simple. Just steam them off, boil them at home until they're nice and tender. Allow them to cool a little bit before you go into the pot. I like to once again kind of build a little flavor, so I'll be using some shallots in the potato and kind of let them sweat down a little bit, get a little translucent and season them, so that way they can actually contribute some flavor to the potatoes as well. The biggest thing with cooking really is, because cooking is really quite simple, it doesn't take a lot. Like I have onions, I have steak, I have some potatoes, I have some cream butter and salt, pepper, and a few herbs. You know, I mean, a fistful of ingredients, 10 or less, you can put together a really nice dish. The most important part of it is just building flavor and allowing each item to take the time it needs to develop flavor, to caramelize, to roast, to sweat, whatever the cooking technique is on that item, but it's giving it its time to do so. So I'm just gonna let some shallots sweat over here real quick. Just a small fine dice, just a little bit of salt. Salt naturally is actually a preservative, which means it draws out moisture from what it's being put on. Like think the mummies, you know, embalming them in salt, and it dries them all out like a big piece of beef jerky, without sounding too vulgar. But what you're gonna do is when you put salt on something like onions or tomatoes, it helps draw out the flavor of the sugars and everything like that, and help it kind of really taste more like itself. You just slice a tomato, it tastes like tomato. Put a little salt on it, tastes more like a tomato, not salty. When you over season something is when it becomes salty. So we're gonna let that go for just a quick second. We're gonna keep our shallots over here. Just gonna clean some of these mushrooms up real quick. Mushrooms naturally just go really well with steak. It's kind of like that combative kind of meaty texture. It has a lot to offer, and mushrooms are like sponges. They soak up a lot of flavor. Your butters, your aromatics, your herbs. I'm actually going to sear the steak first, and while it's resting, I'm going to go ahead and add the mushrooms, so that way it kind of helps deglaze and take some of that caramelization from the steak, and the seasoning, and kind of make a quick pan sauce out of it. So mushrooms, we're just going to rip it, nothing too crazy. If you're getting your mushrooms from a nice purveyor, you really don't need to wash them. A lot of people wash the mushrooms. Going back to how mushrooms are like sponges, when you wash them, they kind of take in all that water and hold it. And when you're trying to do something like roast them or caramelize them, the first thing that needs to happen is all the water needs to dissipate or evaporate before it can really start to sear. So if you wash them real hard and they soak up all that water, the mushrooms essentially, doesn't matter how hot the pan is, how much oil you have in it, is the mushrooms are going to really start to steam before they start to caramelize. By the time they get to the point where they can start doing that, they're mushy and they're no good. And with these mushrooms especially, you want to retain that meaty bite that they have. You don't want to take too much from that. So onions will come to a nice sweat. I just have some minced garlic here, and a little bit of parsley, some minced garlic and herbs. This is definitely a cool thing just to have in the fridge. If you have a food processor, just throw some cloves of garlic, throw a little bit of parsley into it. There's really nothing you can't add it to that's going to hurt it. So really have added, I'm Italian, so I like that. The only way to truly get to do that is a really hot pan. Cast iron works really well if you happen to have one. If not, any pan will really do. Because you want every little square inch, every little bit of this steak to hit this hot oil and get a chance to sear and caramelize, because even steak has a little bit of natural sugar in it that's going to contribute to that caramelization. And it's even heat. It's easier to cook. Grill, you have your hot spots. Here's good, here's not good. You put it on, it sears, you get that nice grill mark on it, then you flip it and it's kind of cold. So now the other side's like, that's the plate downside. We don't want anyone to see that. With a pan, you kind of get to avoid all that. You can kind of make it evenly cooked all the way through. And I think time management wise, like your steak 3 minutes one side, 3 minutes another, let it rest. It's easier in a pan because it maintains that heat pretty much all the way through. So we have our mushrooms. We have our shallots. Over here, we're going to add some of our boiled potatoes real quick to our sweated shallots, our garlic and herbs. We're gonna add a little bit of cream to it. I just add half and half because red skin potatoes tend to be not as starchy as your other potatoes, so I don't think you need a heavy cream. I think it'll kind of do the work on its own. Just a little bit of cream. Buttermilk is also a great option when making mashed potatoes. It brings a little bit of acidity into what is something otherwise is bland, kind of just starchy medium. So I mean, buttermilk kind of brings a little bit of acidity and tartness to it. A lot of cooking is contrasting flavors with your fats and your acids and your salts and your heats. So just another opportunity to kind of do that and build the flavor. There are mushrooms. We have our oil getting hot. We're going to make a quick little chimichurri as well too, with just some fresh herbs. Chimichurri is a Mediterranean, South American sausage made from fresh chopped herbs, garlic, onions, oils, and I like to use just a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of some spices in there as well. Today I have coriander and cumin. So just some chopped carrot tops actually right here. Just a little bit of rosemary with the steak, because rosemary just goes very well with steak. Just a quick fine little dice on it. Obviously, I did cheat today. I brought garlic already minced. I didn't feel like mincing garlic. It's one of those things where it can take a lot of time. Food processors are your best friends. If you don't have one, get one. They're great. So a little bit of garlic and herbs over here. A little bit of our rosemary. I just have some nice olive oil and vinegars over here. little bit of chili flake. Just a little tiny bit of cumin and coriander. And then our olive oil. Let's go down real quick. So our pan's getting to a smoke point, is what they call it. By the way, this is 90-10 oil. This is 90% vegetable or canola and 10% olive. When you're using your blended oils, your vegetables, your canolas, they have a higher smoke point, which means it can come to a higher temperature before it begins to burn. Olive oil tends to more like to be a finishing oil, you know, something used to finish something, to give a little drizzle. You don't want to lose the flavor of it because it's so saturated with fats. Is when you put it into a hot pan, it'll actually burn. It almost kind of you'll smell almost kind of like a gasoline flavor when you start to toss something and you get a little flame on the end and stuff. So you want to use an oil like vegetable, canola, blended oil to kind of start your cooking off. Smoke point is right when you see the oil kind of start to smoke. It looks really loose. You can tell because you'll hear it sizzle pretty much as soon as right as it goes in the pan. Steak right in. As soon as it goes in, I like to maintain that high heat just so the temperature in the pan can kind of back up to the temperature just lost when you put that steak in. For about 40 seconds, I'll turn it back down to like a medium high. It's doing good over here, simmering away. A little trickle of chimichurri as well. It is a loose sauce. Just oil, just vinegar, just herbs. It's not meant to be much else more than that. But you are going to have vinegar in here. You are going to have an oil. So what's going to happen is naturally it's going to try to separate, right? A liquid and a fat. Just a little bit more vinegar in there. So I'm actually going to add just the smallest amount of whole grain mustard. Mustard is an emulsifier naturally. What it does is it helps the binding of two liquids that aren't supposed to mix. For example, vinegar and oil. The fat and the liquid, they're going to want to fight and stay separate. The mustard will actually help them come together. This is a great trick for things like salad dressings as well too. You make a broken dressing at home. If you want to do like a mustard balsamic, that mustard's going to help it kind of pull together and hold and be one uniform sauce, as opposed to having this much oil on top of your jar and having this much vinegar at the bottom with some herbs floating in the middle. A nice quick chimichurri right here. Once the steak's in the pan, you really don't want to mess with it too much. You want to leave it right where it went in. You don't want to pick it up and check it, this and that. The same thing with burgers, as in steaks, as is chicken, as in whatever, is to achieve your desired temperature. You really don't need to continue to flip it and flip it and flip it. Back to the beginning when we talked about the transfer of heat and how it works, is the more frequently you flip something, the heat's taking all this time to try to get into the center of it, right? Now you flip it. Now it's trying again. Now it's trying again. Now it's trying again. So it's constantly trying to play catch up to get the internal temperature of that cut of meat to where you want it to be. But since you keep flipping it and flipping it and flipping it, it's like it has to keep restarting and restarting. You're gonna get that really defined, hard, well done ring on the outside or the exterior of your meat before you get to a rare inside. And you're like, hi, this is a medium rare, but it's literally like medium well and then rare. There's no in between, you know? So give it its time, let it sear, let the temperature kind of rise up and do its thing. Once your curry comes to a simmer, we can really turn that heat down. I have a little bit of wind right now, so I'm trying to keep the flame a little higher. You don't want your cream and your potatoes to scorch. Scorched cream is one of those things that's really hard to come back from. Once you scorch it, it's pretty much all over. There's really no saving it. So we're just gonna let it kind of do its thing. It's almost where it needs to be, where the potatoes just want to kind of naturally start falling apart. I do love Redskins for use like this. They do hold up a little bit better with some bite and some texture, and a little bit of potato that does start to kind of rub off will make that creamy sauce kind of around them. The steak right here, if anyone wants to come and see it, we have some beautiful caramelization on it. Nice and even all the way through. You can literally sit here and take like a fork or a knife and you can scrape it and you can feel it dragging back. You have that flavor and that texture, the caramelization of the meat. There's some chew, the unctuousness of the steak, and a little bit of crunch to it. So we've built some flavor into it. That's why we use saute pans. I'm firm on this. No one will ever convince me otherwise. So we're on the steak, flank steak. You have a flank steak here. People don't use flank steak at home a lot. I'm finding today's day and age, there's a lot of cuts of meat that are very popular, that are very expensive. Your ribeyes, your New York strips, your filet mignons. Heck, even short rib now is through the roof. I think it's like #2 trending cook item on YouTube now because it's like crock pot. It really opens the door for things like flank steaks and other less known cuts of meat to kind of get an opportunity to shine and be used at home. Flank steak being one of those. It's a really beautiful piece of meat. It comes from the back end of the stomach, kind of towards the end of the brisket, all the way at the tail end. So it does have some decent fat to it. It is naturally a kind of stringy cut of steak, where the tenderness of it is actually come from how you cut it, not so much how you cook or marinate it. You can get the steak to be extremely tender and melt in your mouth without needing to sit it like skirt steak in vinegars and allow it to sit and break down. It'll pretty much do it on its own. The steak's almost ready to come out and get to a rest, in which case we'll start roasting our veggies and our shallots and our mushrooms. The potatoes look like they have a nice texture. I'm actually turning the heat off of them. That's not too mealy. When working with potatoes, you want to avoid overcooking and over mixing. Potato has starch, so the more that you mix it, you're working those strands of starch, and that's where you get that kind of Elmer's glue, that gummy texture, that pasty consistency that we want to avoid. So once they kind of get to where they need to be, leave them alone, let them sit, turn your heat off, let them do their thing. You don't want to keep mixing and mixing. Same rule applies for mashed potatoes that are nice and smooth. The more that you put a stick blender in them, or the more that you try to sit there and mash them, the gummier they're going to get. Yeah, that's really nice. So we're actually going to take the steak out right now and let it rest. So I come up and look how perfectly seared that steak is. And it really didn't take much. I think it was three minutes each side, just a hot pan with the right temperature, a good oil. I didn't really do anything to it. Nothing up here makes me look like I've been cooking for 15 years. I put a piece of meat in a hot pan and flipped it once. So now we have our oil and all that, the seasoning and the caramelization. It's called fondant cooking, actually. It sticks to the bottom of the pan. We're going to add our mushrooms right into it. We don't want to waste any of that flavor that the steak had. Once again, we're going to season immediately, because mushrooms do have a little bit of liquid in them. The salt being preserved is going to help draw out that water so we can get it cooked and out of there as fast as possible, so we can start getting a little bit of color in there. I'm going to add a little bit of my shallot right now as well. The shallot, the juices that are going to come out of it once it's being cooked is what's actually going to help deglaze, as well as a little bit of vinegar here in a minute. You can see the mushrooms actually immediately soaked up like all the oil. Like it's all gone, which is great because it's going to take all that flavor that the steak had and it's going to pull it all together and hold on to it. We haven't really lost anything. It seems minuscule, but when you spend money on a nice piece of steak, you don't want to lose any bit of the juices, the season, the crust, nothing. So mushrooms are a great catalyst for that because it soaks it all up, and you get a chance to keep all that flavor and build upon it. So it's really nice. These mushrooms are wonderful. They're already starting to pick up some color and get some caramelization to them. Hot pan's important. Never put vegetables or anything into a pan with lukewarm oil and let the oil get hot. It always needs to do it once it is hot. They're starting to cook down, build some flavor. Shallots are getting a little bit of caramelization to them. I'm going to come in here with just the littlest bit of vinegar. Help deglaze the rest of that pan. Garlic at the end. The garlic will burn a little bit easier. A nice big fat pat of butter. Once we have the butter, I'm going to come in here with a little bit of rosemary. A lot of butter. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of rosemary. Let that get all nice, hot, and fat. I'm actually going to bring the steak right back in here real quick. And just to finish off with some of these herbs and these mushrooms. You can be fancy and sit here and spoon butter on. If it's something that's one's called basting. Just keeps the flavor on. It helps really just bring that sear all together. Really wanted the steak to bring on a little bit of that herbaceous flavor. And the mushrooms to soak up anything else that steak might have had to offer us. So our butter's brown, mushrooms look real nice, steak's real nice and crisp. I'm gonna let that sit there just for one quick minute. Got our chimney, we've got our potatoes. I didn't even need these. Drop 3 of them. So we're actually gonna take our steak out now. We kind of already let the process of it resting kind of happen before for a few minutes out there. I'm a firm believer that a steak should always rest at least 4 to 5 minutes once it comes out to its desired temp. So since it's rested through, putting it back in his pan to finish it and season it is really like right before you cut it to get the outside kind of a little bit warm again before you serve it. You want it to be ready to go. So it comes through. If you look at this steak, the tendons that I'm talking about, you can see it's like long strings, straight across, straight across, straight across. You never want to cut with those because you're keeping those strands intact, and that's where the shoot comes from. If you cut against them, just ever so slightly on the bias, nice and long piece, I'm gonna cut right down the middle. Come over here. Always stays. A little bit of salt. It's a little bit of black pepper. Using the act of folding more than anything else. A little bit of nice herb red potato. We come in here with our flank steak. I like to put the chimichurri right on top of the steak so that way the herbs and the vinegars and everything can be right on top of it. A little bit of these mushrooms right on top. That's really about it. I mean, it's steak and potatoes with some mushrooms. I don't know if we have soap or, I mean, feel free to come up, try a piece of steak, try some mushrooms. It's delicious. It's not bad.